The one bias that I've always kind of seen here has been the age bias, and it's one thing that I've never really liked. Let's stop demonizing this industry. I think the oil and gas industry is a really innovative industry that wants to make things as clean as possible.
Gas is considered as a transition fuel. What's your point of view on that?
I would say 100%. I mean, we know natural gas is, if you want to be a senior leader, you have to have that experience on the numbers side of the business. So I would say focus on that. Also, don't be afraid to be taken.
If LNG were a person, what advice would you give?
I think I'd probably tell it to stay strong, because
This is the Oil and Gas Breaking Bias show, where we are going to invite industry leaders to talk about their journeys and also technologies of tomorrow, in an effort to break some of the biases that might have formed around this energy industry. Hello everyone, I hope you're happy and healthy. I'm Anand Jha and you are listening to the Oil and Gas Breaking Bias show. Today I'm happy and excited because we will be joined by my friend and colleague Nathan Tungseth. He's the Senior Vice President of LNG Business at ABB. Nathan has more than 2 decades of global experience where he brings unique technical expertise and strategic insights about this energy business. Today at ABB, he's running LNG global business with a focus on automation, electrification, and sustainable innovations. So with that, let's deep dive into his journey and also get his views on breaking bias in the industry and the future of LNG business. Nathan, I'm very happy to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
thanks, Anand. Thanks for having me here, and happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Nathan, for taking your time. We know each other for a long time, and then we were talking about this podcast, and I see your experience, your knowledge can bring a lot of value and also a lot to share so we can all connect with it. So I don't want to waste any other minute. I will ask you to walk us through your professional and personal journey and also talk about some of the biases and stereotype that you might have came across.
Sure. So I guess, I've been with ABB now for 19 years, which when I started as a young mechanical engineer sounded like an eternity. But I started with Siemens Westinghouse out of school as a mechanical engineer on the turbines and generators division. So working on the power generation side. And I think I quickly realized that being an engineer wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Wanted to be more in sales, wanted to be more in management, wanted to be more in leadership. And Siemens Westinghouse luckily saw that with me, so they pulled me into a leadership development program that they had for a couple of years. And with that, I got to tour around a lot. I got to see various aspects of the business. I got to see how the engineering side worked, how the management side worked, how the sales side worked. And from that, then I decided that sales was more where I wanted to focus. And so I went over to the sales side of the business. They moved me from Florida to California up to Oregon. And then, shortly after I had moved there, then ABB found me, and I came to work from power generation side over to the oil and gas side, and started on more on the automation side with ABB. And then that began my journey over here on this side of the fence. And so I would say, for the last 19 years, I've held a number of roles, from service account manager to national account manager, going more from sales to strategic side of the business, and then took over as the global product group manager for onshore oil and gas back in 2017. And funny enough, they asked me to move from Houston, Texas, over to England. And I told them, you want me to move from Houston, arguably the center of oil and gas for onshore, to England, an island that has no onshore oil and gas? And they said,
Yes,
yeah,
I was going to ask you. Yes,
to go.
that I was going to ask you. Moving from Houston to England to run your oil and gas.
So for me, I scratched my head a little bit, but thought, what a great opportunity for the family, for the kids to do this. And to be honest with you, it made perfect sense once I got over there and realized that from an ABB standpoint, the team that we had in England, they had executed some of these large-scale oil and gas projects, large-scale pipeline projects, large-scale LNG projects, and it put me more centrally located for a global role. And so we started over there in 2017, worked on the onshore upstream side and the midstream side. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. Everything got thrown into a blender. Everybody couldn't move, couldn't travel. And then our leadership said, hey, all expats come on home. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be sitting in a foreign country when you can't travel. And so we made the trek back to the US. And at that time, I transitioned actually in my role to be strictly on the LNG side. And so that I was dabbling on the LNG side, back from 2017 to 2020. And then in 2020, I made the full switch just to be focused on the LNG side. And I would say it was a really exciting opportunity for me, a really exciting time to really focus in on one industry that was arguably a booming industry. We were seeing everything, all the talk about energy transition and carbon emissions, and LNG was really on the forefront of leading that energy transition. So for me, it was exciting as much as I like being on the oil side and the upstream side and the production side, really focusing in on that LNG and helping a lot of countries that weren't able to get lower emission fuels for doing power generation and for doing heating and cooking and a number of different things. I was excited to transfer over to that. You asked me about some of the biases that I've seen in my, sorry to say that it's 24 years now in the industry. I would say the one bias that I've always kind of seen here has been the age bias, and it's one thing that I've never really liked. It's one thing, actually, one of the reasons why I left one career path and moved to another one was I had a number of managers within my company say you have to be in a role a certain amount of time, you have to have a certain number of years before you can transition to the next one. And I always had kind of this gung ho, I can do anything. Give me the
Give me a
opportunity
challenge.
and give me the challenge, and I'll go out there and I'll take it on.
Yes.
But don't give me a time limit on it. Don't tell me that I have to be doing it for a number of years. Tell me what the target is, and I'll go out there and I'll hit that. And that's one bias that I would say I still see in the industry is that people kind of have this, negative connotation of some of the younger generation that's coming in that they haven't put in the time, the effort, like maybe what somebody else does. But I would say that there's a lot of people out there that they are young learners, they're go-getters, and I think give them the opportunity. I think that they'll go out there and they'll surprise you.
And they have energy
And
to
they
make a
have the energy. That's
yes.
right. I mean, being a little bit older now and having the ability to look back on my career and look back on some of those things, they maybe weren't that wrong. I mean, there's some of the times that I think that there is something to be said of having experience and being able to put in the time and effort and being able to bring that experience into your next role. But I do think, passion trumps just about anything else. And if you can have the passion and the drive, then you can go out there and do whatever you set your mind to.
Definitely, like we were discussing, you and I were discussing like some time ago. Attitude you cannot build.
That's right.
Skills can be built. And so
That's
if
right.
somebody with the attitude to get successful, if he or she brings something on the table, actually, it's good to have a look what they can bring. And as yes, there are some roles where experience cannot be ignored. But there are many other roles where you can test that water with somebody with less experience, but with the attitude to make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'll also talk about like you have changed your roles as you just mentioned. You change your companies, but how you came into engineering.
Yeah, so, probably from a very early age. I was one of those kids that if something broke, it wasn't throw it out, it was, well, let's get the screwdriver out and take it apart and see what's wrong with it and see if I can fix it and maybe figure out a way to get it to work again. I would say a lot of those things they started getting my mind working at a very early age of that I like to do engineering. I like to tinker with things. A lot of that came from my dad.
Did,
He
did
was
you
one
break,
of these.
did you break more or fixed?
I probably broke more than I fixed, to be honest with you, but it was fun tinkering with them. But my dad grew up on a farm in Minnesota. His dad came from Norway. You can see my Norwegian flag there. So his dad came over when on the boat when he was 21, and he was one of these kind of farmers who could fix anything. And he didn't have an engineering background. But he had multiple jobs where it was just he was kind of the fix it guy. And I remember going over to my grandfather's house, and whenever we'd be over there, he was always in the garage fixing something. He had his old tool sets there, and there was always something that was broke that he was fixing. And I would get to go in there in the garage with him and tinker with these different things. And then as time went on, that kind of passed down to my dad, and there wasn't anything that he would ever call a repairman for, whether it was a sink, whether it was a broken lawnmower, it didn't matter what it was, no, we can fix that. The washing machine goes out. Well, we can fix that. Let's figure it out. Let's take it apart, see what's wrong. And so I think that kind of led me down the path of really thinking, I like the engineering side of the business. So I went into school. I went to University of Central Florida, went into mechanical engineering. I didn't know what kind of engineering I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do engineering. And as I started focusing in on it, I really liked the mechanical side. So during school, I worked for Lockheed Martin in the missile fire control for a while. And I think when I was there, kind of seeing the way a lot of the engineers were kind of going to their cubicles, designing this one little piece of the overall set that designed whether it was a sonar system or a FLIR system on an F-16 or a shoulder fire rocket, seeing all these different components that these guys were designing really, really got my interest up into the engineering side. And then I transferred that when I went over to working at Siemens Westinghouse onto the power generation, because there you've got turbines, you've got generators, you get to climb inside these big hunks of metal with the blades and the vanes, and just seeing how everything works. And I remember one funny story where I was working with some of the design engineers, and we were looking at the tolerance of a gas turbine on the blades, how far they were away from the wall, and could we get them just a little bit closer? And we were talking on the in millimeters how close we were getting these blades to the wall. And a service engineer came up to me. He goes, "It's interesting that you guys are designing that for millimeters. You know how I get that blade out of that?" I said, "No, how?" He goes, "I hit it with a sledgehammer." And so I go, "All right, well there goes my millimeters that I was designing for."
But I saw you got really excited about your engineering days.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes get passionate about going back to it.
I know. So let me ask you, what do you enjoy more, engineering or your sales job?
I gotta say the sales job. As fun as the engineering is, there's a lot of boring downside that or downtime that comes along with that. So now I'm focused on, more the leadership side, on business development, looking at our LNG opportunities and how we integrate a lot of the solutions at ABB into an LNG opportunity. And for me, what I love most about it is getting around and seeing where these opportunities are. So traveling the world, whether it's over to England or Europe to go see some of the engineering companies that are there, or going up to the north of Norway where we have an all-electric LNG facility, getting out to see the customers and be in front of some of these people, still being on the engineering side, talking the engineering talk, but instead of being in the background and designing a lot of the systems, really being out there on the foreground, saying, how can we design this in the most optimal way? I think that and then leading the teams that actually go after these projects, propose the solution and then integrate these together for the customers, and leading that team, I think that gives me a lot more joy now today.
I can say that because your vision is more broader, and the discussion are also much broader. So instead of just focus on one solution, you can bring multiple solution on the table,
Yeah.
and the team can help to execute those options or the solutions that you're bringing on the table. So that's really great. But that also bring us to my next question. Yeah. You follow this energy industry very closely, as you have already mentioned about it, and now you're leading LNG global business for ABB. How this transition is going towards now? What are the opportunity and challenges for someone who's looking to work in this industry?
You know, we had a young engineer that was working with us in Norway a couple years ago, and he came and he spoke to our leadership team. And we wanted to get the perspective of a young engineer starting up in ABB. How did he see the industry? How did he see working with our team in oil and gas? And when he came and presented to the team, honestly, I thought it would be a puff piece that he would say, "Oh, I love it. This is great. You guys are fantastic." And instead, when he came to us, he said, "I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say that I work in oil and gas. In fact,
Oh,
I don't tell
right.
my friends that I work in oil and gas. I tell them I work for ABB, but I don't say oil and gas." And so I would say
Okay.
that was an eye opener for me, because I love working in oil and gas. I mean, every one of us fills up our cars with gasoline when we go around, or we plug our car into charge, and you need that energy coming from something. I think the oil and gas industry is a really innovative industry that wants to make things as clean as possible. And so I don't look at it as kind of one of these dirty industries that's out there. So for him to say that to our leadership team that was focused on oil and gas, I thought that that was one, brave, but also telling of some of the young engineers and young people that are out there coming into this industry. So the one thing that I would say is, don't be afraid to come into the oil and gas industry. Come into it and make it better. I don't think there's anybody in this industry that says we're sticking our head in the sand and we want to produce a less clean environment for our kids in the future or anything. I think every one of us is trying to do it as clean and efficiently as possible. But the reality is the industry that we built up today, the world that we runs on fossil fuels, and is going to for the next 30 years at least. So until we have a way to transition away from that and we find something else, this is what we've got to work with. And so the bias that I would say is for young people trying to get into this industry or coming into this industry is don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, come after it, but tell your friends about how you're changing things, how you're going to make it better, how we're doing things in a more efficient way to where it's not this dirty industry you have to be embarrassed about. It's, hey, I'm coming in to try and clean up this industry and trying to make it as clean as possible.
Definitely have a seat on the table.
Yeah,
Instead
exactly.
of complaining it, you work with the people in this industry, and if you have something new that bring on the table, so everybody can learn from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And bring it, the one great thing that I think that my experience has brought in is that I've brought in experiences that I've had from pulp and paper, from power generation, from mining and minerals.
Yes.
All of those come in and I look at what we're doing in other industries, in the marine industry, and saying, how do we take technology that we're using over there and how do we apply it here? If you do something really good in some other industries, even if it's medical or whatever it may be, bring that into this industry and say, this is how we did it over there, and this really helped. I think that we have a lot of technology that's out there that can really better what we're trying to do, make energy more efficiently with less emissions. And so I think that what I would say is bring it on, come to the table, but have a seat at the table and have that discussion. Don't be on the way on the outside.
So one thing I will ask you, like gas is considered as a transition fuel. What's your point of view on that?
I would say 100%. I mean, we know natural gas is 60% cleaner than some of the other hydrocarbons that are out there when burned for power generation. My house here, I use natural gas for heating the grill, for heating my house, for lighting my stove. I don't ever light my stove and sit there and go, oh my gosh, this is a danger. Get my kids away. I can't have them around here while I'm cooking dinner. I mean, there's times in our lives when we look at it and we go, this is very clean. And then we
Yes.
look at it in the media and it goes, this is very bad and this is not so clean.
I always say there are lots of noise. You have to dissect that noise to find what is real, what is not real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think natural gas. I mean, it's a fact that it's cleaner than burning other hydrocarbons. We know that. I think when I look around, China's opening or India right now is opening 8 new coal mines.
Right.
And I did a study a little while ago where I was looking at it for a talk I was doing in CERAWeek. The emissions from those 8 coal mines, what they were going to produce was I have to remember now, but I think that it was the amount of 6 times every vehicle on the planet. So you look at that and you go, okay, we can either do more with coal or we can transition more to gas and we can get this gas to people who need it so that they don't have to do more with coal. I mean, even if you look at, places like England shut down their last coal-fired power plant this last year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an exciting time. You think about England starting the Industrial Revolution and everything and beginning with the coal-fired power plant, and they just shut down their last one. Whereas you look at China, and while China's doing a lot on renewables, and renewables fantastic. I mean, the more we can do with them where it makes sense, I think we should. If we can do more wind, if we can do more solar, if we can do more hydropower, fantastic. But all of those have downsides also. And
Yes,
quite honestly, all of those require, the fossil fuel industry in order to make them. I mean, you don't get a carbon fiber blade without carbon, right? So
That's exactly we also talked about the money we can generate from oil and gas. That money can be used to bring new innovation
absolutely.
in the market.
Yeah. But
So
all of those are intermittent power sources. None of those are running 24/7. And so you have to have something to augment that. And whether that's going to be coming from a coal-fired power plant or a gas-fired power plant or a nuclear power plant. And so I think, there's choices that we have out there. I think gas is one of those, look, it's not the perfect choice, but I think it's a much better choice. And so I think the more that we can get people using gas, a cleaner solution, as opposed to say coal, a not so clean solution, I think that that's just better for the environment. And if you look at the emissions here in the U.S., we increased our power generation over the last 10 years by I think it was 60%, and we reduced our emissions by 40%. So we increased by 60%, but at the same time reduced our emissions
really,
by 40%. And the way we did that was by switching from coal to gas. So
yeah.
it's a pretty easy equation.
There's one thing I want to add here because we know about this gas, and also you mentioned about India, Vietnam, or some other part of the world. One thing I will argue, and also the listeners who are listening here, we have to make gas more affordable. That's one challenge I see here. Then we can bring the countries which are more on the development path. They can use these energy resources. So we have to look into all those dynamics. But as you mentioned, gas is here to stay for long. Like
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I
No,
think the other part to that too is if you look around the world, there's three major pipeline structures around the world. One's in the US, one's in China, one's in Europe. We don't have this massive pipeline infrastructure everywhere. And so I know India right now is doing a lot of pipeline infrastructure. In fact, I just saw ABB won a SCADA order over there just recently where they were putting in a large network for gas distribution. I think the more gas distribution we can do, the better. I mean, we've got to get it from places where we produce a lot of gas cheaply,
yes, you're
namely
right.
here in the US, areas like Qatar, some of the areas in Australia. I mean, my industry in LNG, we then take and we liquefy that down and we get it to areas that don't have that, but they need that distribution infrastructure once it gets
Definitely.
there so that
Definitely.
it can get to, homes and places. It doesn't do people a whole lot of good if it comes to the coast, but then they can't get it over to their home to heat their home.
Definitely. So everybody has to play part in it, like from production for liquefaction to transportation, and so,
Absolutely.
so that network should be there. That's great. I think that's a really broad topic. It would be very hard to cover everything in and out about this energy industry. But I'm switching a topic here, like going back to your journey. You had an incredible journey as we have started. But if you have given a chance to reflect back, what changes you might make?
Boy, let's see. Changes I would make. I think, I would probably say if I was going to go into a leadership role, I should have taken some additional leadership classes early on, some financial classes earlier on than what I did in order that I could really understand a lot of the numbers side of the business. I think the numbers side of the business is really important. And if you want to be a senior leader, you have to have that experience on the numbers side of the business. So I would say focus on that. Also, don't be afraid to be taking some of these leadership classes. I know I've taken a number of leadership classes over the years, but the one thing I've probably done over the last 10 years is said, I think I've taken enough of those. And I think each time you go to them, you learn more and more and more. And it's one thing that if I would look back over the last probably 10 years, I would say focus more on keeping that leadership or that learning journey going and not stopping, not pulling back. There's a great book that says, what got you here won't get you there. And a lot of people think that once they get to the corner office that, okay, I've made it and they can kind of sit back and I think even true with myself that maybe I sat back a little bit and what I should have done is you got to keep pouring on. You got to keep that leadership equally, you got to be visible. The one thing that I think the pandemic really hurt a lot of us with was everybody went remote. Everybody was not in the office and not talking and being visible. I think if you want to be a leader in your business, if you want to be a leader in this industry, you have to be visible. You have to be out there. You have to be talking to lots of people. People have to know who you are. And so I think that visibility is a key piece to develop
So what I'm understanding, personal branding is important.
for sure. 100%.
No, no, makes sense, makes sense. So no, that's really good. And you mentioned about that learning process that never stops. Sometimes we think we have done enough, but it's never enough.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can always learn something new.
Yeah.
And also one thing we talked before, always ask for maybe new opportunity, new challenge. And like sometimes we think if you keep doing this work, somebody will come to us and ask for new opportunity. But at the same time, you have to raise your hand and say like, guys, I'm available. To take new challenge. And then it goes both ways, correct? Like yes, the company should look for those kind of people, but also the person who's done good job, they should also raise their hand as needed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the misconceptions that I've always had, kind of growing up was that if you do a good job, people will recognize it and they'll go, "Hey, you're my guy. I want you on for the next role." And they're just going to keep pulling you up. And as I've gotten a little bit more senior in my career, I've realized if you don't raise your hand, if you don't say, "Hey, I'm ready for the next step," people don't know. They don't just automatically go, you did a good job, therefore you're ready for the next one. Actually, a lot of times they go, you did a really good job. You're invaluable there. I don't want to move you. You did so good. I want to keep you
I don't
right where
want to
you are.
move you. I don't want to move you to something else. So the underline is there. Your destiny is in your hand.
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
can
But
you can you can
I
you can
think you
ship
got
it
to
out
go
all
out
you.
there. It's if you're going to go out there and make a name for yourself, you got to go out there and you got to find the right opportunities. And it's up to you to take them. It's also up to you to put your hand up there and let people know, hey, I'm ready for the next step.
Definitely.
I've kind of had this number in my head all the time that, 5 years in any role is about that time when you should be going, okay, let's get some fresh blood in here to take over from where I am because maybe I'm getting a little stale in what I'm
Yeah,
doing and
definitely.
I'm ready for the next opportunity or should be ready for the next opportunity.
That's a good way to put it. So with that, that also brings us to rapid fire round as
All right.
part of this interview. So let's see how ready you are, Nathan.
All right. Bring it on.
So let me ask you, what's your secret weapon for surviving Monday mornings?
Coffee.
Okay, that keeps
For
you
me,
going.
coffee, I would say coffee and organization. So I always look on Sunday nights, I look at my calendar, what do I have, get my agenda lined up, and then have a plan for Monday morning to hit the ground running.
And that's great. Rock star or barista in another life?
Sorry, say it again.
Rock star or barista in another life?
Oh, definitely a rock star.
You are a rock star.
I would have been Guns N' Roses.
What do you like more, beach mountains or just the couch?
For me, beach. I am definitely a beach kid. Grew up in Southern California. That's where I would be if I could.
What's your go-to boss move in a crisis moment?
I would say taking the bull by the horns, taking the leadership role, and trying to get ahead of whatever's going on, understand, but also make sure that people know, look, I'm not afraid to take that leadership role.
Any book or podcast that you have enjoyed recently?
Like I said, we lived in England for a little while. I really like the BBC does a podcast every day, a couple times a day, and to be honest with you, it kind of gives me my world news so that I listen to it whenever I'm in the car.
That's interesting. So you are still living your UK days.
Still living my UK life. Yeah.
uh, so this question I have to ask because you are LNG guy. So if LNG were a person, what advice would you give?
If it were a person,
Yes,
I would tell it, I think I'd probably tell it to stay strong because you're in it for the long haul and don't give up. A lot
makes
of
sense.
these projects are very difficult. They're very big. They take, anywhere from
Years and years.
10 to 12 years to develop, maybe even longer. And you've got to have fortitude in order to stay with it. But I think the benefits far outweigh if we just let them go. So
Definitely, demand
the
is
other
there.
thing I would say is get easier, be easier.
So demand is there, is not going anywhere
It's
soon.
not going anywhere. I see it definitely increasing. I think it's only going to get better with what we do from emission standards and everything and the way that we produce it. But we've got to figure out how to get some of the regulation tape out of the way to make these things happen sooner.
Definitely. So that's really good way to put it. I can tell you have done really good, Nathan. Maybe next time I will have more sharp question. So
Yeah.
I won't leave you that easy.
Oh, okay, okay. Leave me with some cuts next time.
Definitely. Next time I there will be more sharper question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like it. I like it.
No, that's great. So we are coming end of our discussion, but I have to ask you like two things. First, like if to summarize everything in few sentences, like what will be one key takeaway for somebody who's looking to make a career or business in this industry?
Um, I would say be passionate about it, study it, understand it, be part of it. Don't just do the job. Actually really embrace it if you want to come into this industry. I mean, it's funny. I've got a son who's in high school now, and some of the questions are starting to come up about our industry because it's being talked about a lot in the media and at school. And I've come to find out, a lot of things I just take for granted that people know and understand. And as I've been talking to a high schooler, I realize not a lot of the public really understands the ins and outs of the business, and the industry. And so I would say really take the time to work and understand the industry, but be passionate about it. Get behind it. And I think it's a great industry to be in. At ABB for us, we don't just focus on oil and gas. While I focus strictly on the LNG side, I mean, there's a number of different components of the industries that can be in, whether it's strictly electrical, whether it's doing race cars for Formula E, whether it's doing mining and minerals. There's so many different industries that you can go in, regardless of which one it is, though. Be passionate about it and really take ownership of where you want your career to go within that industry.
No, that makes perfect sense. Like so you can make your own path going forward.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
there's another thing like I want to ask you, what one bias that exists in this industry? It could be within the industry or it could be towards industry.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I think the bias that I look at is that, this is a dirty, nasty industry that's ruining the environment and ruining the way that, ruining our environment for future generations. And I would just say that bias, I think, is wrong. I think, everything that we're doing in this industry right now is to try and make it better. It's to try and develop energy with less emissions. But it's also to try and keep the lights on, right? It's to make sure that people have affordable fuel to where they can drive to work. It's so they can have their iPhones. It's so, people in other countries, maybe where they don't have a lot of energy, they can start to have some of the benefits that we have with having reliable energy. I know we all are very lucky where we're talking to each other on a computer here. The lights are on and I have air conditioning in my house. A lot of people aren't that lucky. And so I think the bias is that, you know, yes, the industry is a fossil fuel industry, and we want to get away from that. We want to find whatever that next solution will be. But in the meantime, let's stop demonizing this industry. Let's make it as clean as possible, because I think everybody in this industry all wants the same thing. We want a cleaner environment for our kids that we hand off with reliable power and without jeopardizing the lifestyle that they're having right now.
No, that's a really good way to put it. So everybody has to make a contribution if you want a cleaner future here.
Absolutely.
So with that, we are coming to the end, Nathan. But before we sign off, anything to add here?
Yeah, I just say thanks for the opportunity for coming out here. I mean, I think I love being a mouthpiece for the LNG industry, for ABB, for what we're doing in this place. On my side, we're really trying to add more electrification into this industry, do things cleaner, greener for a brighter future. And so, I appreciate you getting the message out there and look forward to having some of these young engineers come and find me and come to work for ABB.
That's great. So thank you so much, Nathan, for your time. A lot to talk about, a lot to learn from you. So with that, I will sign off for today. Keep listening, Oil and Gas Baking by Show. See you next week. Have a great day.